hope you enjoy it. I've known my friend Matt for around 2 years now. Our group of friends likes to play poker, throw darts and shoot pool. We also like to watch sports together, and Matt is well regarded for throwing big parties at his house. So when I got the Facebook invite for his Super Bowl party, I knew I was in. Matt's house is at the top of a hill on a corner lot, adjacent to two fairly quiet residential streets. The last party I attended there was a crazy packed 4th of July fireworks party in the summer, and the neighborhood was booming that night. For the big game, however, it was a smaller crowd of a dozen or so, and even though this winter has been mild for us here in the Midwest, we kept the party indoors. I am 32 years old and recently separated. My friends are mostly all 30-somethings and married, some with children. Matt is 38 years old, married and has 3 daughters. Grace is 18 years old, Alexa is 12 and Kayla is 9. He owns a small business as an electrician, and his trademark is that he almost always wears Under Armour BRND hoodies and athletic gear for some reason or another. Matt's wife, Abby, was sporting a recently procured BB job, and this was my first time seeing her since the surgery. Before the operation, Abby would join us for games of Texas Hold'em and talk about the whole process of picking a surgeon, the initial consultation, and deciding how big she wanted to go. Her strategy involved looking at pictures of other women's surgeries, talking to friends who had previously been enhanced, having discussions with her drive, etc. It was a bit strange for me to be a part of this discussion since it's such a personal subject, but our group had discussed intimate things before, and it never got awkward, and this wasn't too different. Ultimately, Abby went big. Double D's or maybe more to complement her medium frame. She was not at all shy when it came to talking about them and showing them off in front of us all and even in front of her daughters, which I thought was a bit odd. I guess it would be hard to hide the fact that mom got a BB job from her 3 young girls, but the casual way in which she discussed it in front of them still stood out to me. I couldn't help but wonder if it made Abby's oldest daughter Grace feel self-conscious about her own much smaller breasts, which appeared to be an A or a B cup on her slim frame. Alexa and Kayla, the youngest daughters, are both big-time daddy's girls and like to hang out with us when we play cards. We haven't seen nearly as much of Grace, the oldest, since she was either out of the house or spending time in her room, or other parts of the house when we were in the middle of our poker game. But, things with her were different during the Super Bowl game. She hung out with us all night, eating snacks, watching football, and laughing at the commercials. Grace is 18, has light brown hair, big blue eyes and is of slightly above average height, and has a pate body. She has BRCS, and a bit of a baby face, or maybe it's just the BRCS just make her look young? Anyway, even though she is technically an adult at 18, I still feel like a dirty old man when she catches my eye and my mind goes to less than wholesome places. She was wearing black yoga pants with a skin-tight purple shirt layered with an unzipped Under Armour hoodie. When it comes to fashion, it's like father like daughter, I guess. During the game, Grace sat on the floor with her sisters and the others in the younger crowd at the party, surrounded by the rest of us who were sitting on Matt's sectional, or various folding chairs, around the large living room. I can't imagine that it's very comfortable to sit on the floor for long stretches of time, so I shouldn't have been surprised by Grace rearranging herself, and changing the way she was sitting frequently. As well as occasionally stretching, or getting into various yoga positions. It's just that, I couldn't help but watch. And I got the distinct feeling that she liked the attention this behavior was garnering for her. She would occasionally look at me with her cute BRC face and smile, or laugh at something funny I said. Maybe it was all in my head, I told myself, but I couldn't help but feel like a portion of her attention-seeking, if that's what it was aimed directly at me. Surely that's the beer talking, I told myself. My inner voice was trying to suppress the inappropriate thoughts I was having, but that was a lost cause. At this point I was just trying to make sure I didn't stare at her in an obvious or inappropriate way in front of her dad. Later that evening, after halftime, and during a commercial break, Grace did a backbend and I found myself fixated on the seductive outline of her crotch. Geez, you're a dirty old man, I told myself. My inner voice was judging me again. It was an exciting fourth quarter, as I'm sure you all remember, and when it was all said and done, we snacked on some food, discussed the crazy game, and settled our various bets around the room. I found myself in the kitchen just casually shooting the breeze with Grace while we each ate some game day favorites. She wanted to talk to me about my experience in college since I'm currently back in school finishing my degree after dropping out over a decade ago. She said she's considering becoming the first in her immediate family to attend a university, but isn't sure about all the details. She seems like such a nice girl, I hope she finds the right path for herself. Before long, some of the group had gone home, and we decided to break out the poker table, getting a game going with everyone who was still sticking around. Grace disappeared to her bedroom, so my primary distractions at this point were shooting the breeze with friends, drinking beer, and playing poker. Between Abby's new BBS and Grace's yoga moves earlier, I was A-Trini. But since everyone at this party was off limits to me, I didn't think my chances of finding action were very good. I had recently installed Tinder and Bumble and I was trying my hand at swiping right between poker hands. Maybe I'll get lucky, I thought. Typically, when we play poker, we play cash games so that if someone loses all their chips they can simply buy back in whenever they want, but on this night, we decided to play tournament style instead. That means that anyone who loses all their chips is out until someone wins the entire tournament, and then the next tournament starts. I'm usually a pretty good player, but it wasn't my night, and I lost some big hands early on, ultimately getting knocked out of the tournament in last place. I didn't take the loss too badly and it was time to pay the rent on the beer anyway, so I headed for the bathroom down the hallway. When I opened the door to the bathroom, I was shocked to see Grace standing in front of the mirror, applying a black face mask to her skin, wearing nothing but a sports BR. She was standing there completely bottomless and I had a front row seat to the show. Her pale-skinned, pate frame arched forward towards the mirror, showing off her thin waist and prominent SS. She was shapelier than I had remembered from my ogling earlier. Since the mirror was on the wall to my left in the bathroom, I had a side view of her beautiful body. It felt longer, but I'm sure that less than 2 seconds went by before I gasped in surprise, and so did she as she looked over at me standing in the doorway. She had forgotten to lock the door. Within moments, I apologized and reached for the doorknob, closing the door smoothly and quietly, ensuring I didn't slam it and bring undue attention to our embarrassing situation. I stood solemnly in the hallway, attempting to compose my thoughts, as I pressed down on my jeans trying to conceal the bulge that was developing inside of them. Then, I heard the doorknob rattle. I assumed Grace was going to actually lock it this time to avoid any more unintended interruptions of her nighttime routine. But, that isn't what she did. Instead, she opened the door, just a crack, letting the latch rest on the strike plate. She was standing on the other side of the door, not saying a word. I don't know if it was the beer, the testosterone coursing through my veins, or just how atrony I had been all day that made me do it, but I silently began opening the door to go inside. As I entered, Grace was standing near the wall just behind the door, so it only opened about 2/3 of the way. As I maneuvered inside the bathroom, she greeted me with a soft-spoken hi and a Beyonce-faced smile. Her face was mostly covered in black from the exfoliating mask she had been applying. I greeted her back as softly as I could and apologized again for accidentally barging in on her like that. After the uncomfortable pleasantries were out of the way, I became aware of the lustful look in her eye. She was facing me now, still bottomless, her smooth slit curved under the small gap at the top of her thighs. I reached down with my right hand, firmly pulling her towards me, and started kissing her deeply. I was completely unconcerned with the sticky black mask infusing itself in the stubble around my lips. She moaned quietly yet viscerally as we kissed, and I could feel her body melting into my arms. There was no doubt in my mind that we both needed this. As we kissed, I began to touch her small breasts through her sports bra. I could feel her nipples responding to my touch and becoming erect. I was more turned on than ever before, and for me, erect was an understatement. I had to get my pants off, so I unbuckled my belt and undid the button at the top of my jeans. Grace was more than willing to help me out with this proposition, and, as she slid down my zipper and pulled my pants below my knees, she gently fell to her own knees in the process. There I stood in the bathroom, my shoes still on, my blue jeans and boxers pulled down to my ankles, my close friend's eldest daughter kneeling in front of me with my PP gripped firmly in her dominant right hand and traces of the sticky black face mask on her index and middle fingers. In retrospect, I'm surprised that I allowed it to get this far. Surprised that things happened this quickly. But, that was the logical part of my brain talking, and I wasn't being driven by logic. I was being fueled by lust. As she sucked and stroked me, I couldn't help but feel pangs of nerves as I heard my friend's muffled laughter and the sound of the TV in the living room down the hall. We needed to be quiet, and we needed to be quick. I reached down and pulled her sports bra over her head, tossing it in the corner next to the bathtub. Then, she went right back to work and was doing a nice job of maintaining a steady rhythm, occasionally massaging the frenulum just beneath the head of my PP, using her thumb as she sucked the tip of my PP inside her lips. It was as hard as I'd ever been in my life. Up to this point, I'd never received a blowjob from someone who had BRSS, and I thought there might be some pain involved, but don't listen to the negative rumors, it is marvelous. It didn't take long until I felt myself approaching climax, so before I reached the point of no return, I silently encouraged her to stand up, switching roles with her as I knelt down, taking off my shoes and kicking off my jeans. As she stood in front of me, she spread her feet slightly and arched her hips. This provided as much access to my willing lips and tongue as was possible for this position. She was absolutely soaked. I loved tasting her sweet, slick juices as my tongue caressed her slit as she quivered and moaned above me. I grasped her firmly from behind with both hands, helping her arch into me, and pressed my stubbly unshaven face hard against her soft, smooth skin. In that moment, I felt the desire to F her more than I've ever needed anything in my life. I would have been happy to move heaven and earth, and thankfully, she was happy to comply with these desires. I pushed her away from me, turning her around and bending her head down over the vanity. She reached back with her left hand, grabbing her SS and revealing her tight pink holes to me. I didn't waste any time before pressing into her, feeling her silky wetness as it wrapped tightly around my girth. As I took her from behind, I knew I wasn't long for this world. Her heavenly slit, warm, slick and wet, stretched tightly around my PP as I thrust myself inside her. I didn't ever want this moment to end, but I knew that I had to be quick. My friends would be expecting me and, who am I kidding, it was so effing hot I couldn't have lasted any longer if I tried. I whispered to her that I was going to CM, and quickly pulled out my PP, pressed into the crack at the top of her SS, spraying hot CM all the way up her back. She turned around and titled me, no words needed. Our heavy breathing said enough. We held each other for a short while before she retrieved washcloths from beneath the sink and dampened them with warm water so that we could clean ourselves up. When I was clean, I put my clothes back on and she hid behind the door as I opened it and left into the hallway. Thankfully, everyone was still in the living room, so I made my way back to the group as she closed and locked the door behind me. My friend Matt had assumed that I'd gone number 2, and sarcastically thanked me for taking a poop in the nearest bathroom, then encouraged everyone else to use the one in the basement if they needed to go while the one upstairs was airing out. I took my lumps with dignity and happily played right along with his hypothesis. Grace, as Abby pointed out a little later in the night, decided to take a bath in that bathroom before bed.